Hello and welcome to For Your Reference, brought to you by the Council on Library and Information Resources. I'm Robin.
And I'm Paris.
Joshua couldn't be here today, so we're going to take this on ourselves. Now, I want to be clear about something. I really do like Sarah McLachlan, and I love the ASPCA. But this song has just been ruined for me with these commercials because, it's like, man, I'm already sending you money. Please stop torturing me and maybe show me an adoption story. I need...
You need something positive.
Something positive.
Yeah. I'm a streamer these days, and I pay for no commercials because I'm living life like that. But back in the day,
living large.
When those commercials come on, obviously, like, you use that for bathroom break because it's all sad. It's always these like sad little puppies who have like no hair. They're like shivering hyenas, and the snow is blowing on them, and you're like, who's the person filming this? Like, what?
Right? Could you please just take this dog in and throw a blanket on it or something?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard out here.
And then you've got the endangered species commercials as well with the tigers and the elephants. And was it endangered or is it threatened?
I think that there's a distinction there with some manner of nuance, but I don't know.
Yeah, and then you can throw in extinct, which I think I remember reading is more complicated than just there are no more of these anywhere. And I think those are all on a continuum, but I'm not sure in what order.
Yeah, neither am I. But hang on. I know how to clear this up. It's time for the emergency librarian.
Emergency librarian, thank you for being here.
Of course.
Hey.
So you have some information for us about the difference between... Yes,
all the things. There's a lot of information. I went down several rabbit holes. I have lots of paperwork. So it's a lot more nuanced. Paris, you were right. And there are kind of four big umbrella terms that we use when we talk about these things. So extinct, threatened, endangered, and least concern are the terms we're going to be working with here. And so all of these terms kind of vary based on the organization that is putting this data out there. So first category is least concern. That one is the one that sounds most like its name. These are species that we're not super worried about. So in my research, I found out that capybaras are one of them. Capybaras are very popular right now, and that's great because there are plenty of them, almost too many of them. Also things like grasses, species that have adapted well to live alongside humans. So like think rodents and certain birds and insects and plants. Also domestic animals can sort of fall under this category. That is also up for debate. Another thing super up for debate is the difference between endangered and threatened. So the organization that is sort of at the forefront of this data collection is called the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And they're a data collection group that considers lots of endangered categories under the umbrella of threatened. So you have vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered are all threatened. All of those are threatened. But the thing about this IUCN is that it's an advocacy group. So they can't be litigious in any way. And in the US, we have a different group, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, which can actually regulate, and they just use the terms threatened and endangered, with threatened being the one that we're like kind of concerned about, and endangered being the one we're very concerned about. And this all falls under the Endangered Species Act of 1973. And so all the things that they list as threatened and endangered have legal protections in the United States. The last category is extinct, and you may be thinking that it too has less nuance, but it doesn't. So there are the things that we know are extinct, like dinosaurs and giant sloths and things like those. Those are known to be extinct. I think it would be kind of hard to miss a dinosaur roaming around. But then there are things that are considered functionally extinct. So I don't know if you remember about a decade ago, a little or big tortoise named Lonesome George passed away. But he was a Pinta Island tortoise. And while he was alive, even his species was considered functionally extinct because he was the last one. So couldn't exactly make any baby Pinta Island tortoises.
Oh.
Yeah. Fun fact, he is taxidermied. You can go see him if you're ever in the Galapagos National Park. You can go visit Lonesome George, who was the last of his kind. So there are also species that are presumed extinct, and those are things that have more recently become extinct that we're like kind of sure that there are no more, but there's always the chance that we could find more. There's also different kinds of extinctions. First, we have like the normal extinction, so background extinction. This is the extinction that just happens over the course of time, like species evolve, new ones take their place, just kind of like the course of nature. But then we have mass extinctions. There have been 5 so far, and they're all due to natural events. But lots of people, lots of experts think that we're in the midst of a 6th mass extinction, and that is probably most likely our fault. So lots of things go into that. Of course, habitat loss and the fact that we're just like ruining all of our natural resources. So that's there's a lot more to that, but those are the highlights for you. So call it endangered, call it threatened. It really depends on who you ask.
Nice. Well, thank you for that, Erin. I'm not going to say I'm clear suddenly on all of this. There's tons of information, but I do have some great access points from the laws that you're talking about to just some of the terminology like extinction and whatnot. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sort of clearing that up for us.
You're welcome.
Since Joshua can't be here, we're going to ask you to stick around for our next segment because it's time to welcome our very special guest for today's episode. This is Reviewer 2. Welcome to Reviewer 2. We invite scholars onto the show to provide about their work, hopefully in a way that is productive and interesting rather than soul killing. Our guest today is Dr. Ira Allen, Associate Professor of Rhetoric, Writing, and Digital Media Studies at Northern Arizona University. Welcome to the show.
Hi, y'all. Thanks a lot for having me here.
Yeah, so before we dive into the meat of the episode, can you give us like a 30-second maybe elevator speech about sort of what about your work?
I'm a rhetorician. So what that means in broad terms is if you are interested in how people get persuaded of things and you want to make money, you study marketing or law. If you're interested in how people get persuaded about things and you're kind of worried about it, you study rhetoric. I'm quite worried about it.
I love that distinction. So we're here to talk to you today about a forthcoming book, Panic Now, Tools for Humanizing. But I want to start by asking you about an accident you had in 2019, because it as you and I have discussed, it has it sort of shaped your thinking around this book.
Yeah. This book is actually a book I wasn't really planning to write. It's stuff that I'd been grappling with, and it just sort of forced its way on me in the way that crisis does. So at the end of the day, the book's about crisis. And in 2019, I had a catastrophic, career-ending. It didn't, as it happened, but career-ending snowboarding accident. So I broke 18 vertebrae, a couple ribs, kind of semi-crushed along. I was on a vent before it was cool. I was on a ventilator for a week right before COVID.
I guess it's good. It happened in 2019.
It really clarified for me, like when people were going on ventilators during COVID, and like that suddenly became like a culturally sort of an item of cultural awareness. I was like, oof, That's horrible. You don't want that. That is so bad. Anyway, so I had this. I had to relearn to walk. I had a lot of support from friends and family, my partner. Just like a lot of people. Basically, I got really fortunate relative to how it could have gone. I'm still permanently disabled in the sense that I can't feel my foot very well or my right leg, blah blah blah. But I got really lucky in terms of being able to redevelop capacity after that. And I think like part of where it led into this writing this book is I've become really interested in, essentially all of my focus in my scholarship has come to be about how do we do things right now that set up capacities for more possibility in worse times. I've had some experience of having more ability to redevelop capacity precisely because of community, partnership, the ways in which I'm fortunately located in the world. And what is it possible for us relative to the collection of crises that are sort of swarming around us and reshaping our material and social infrastructures? What can we do right now to prepare so that as those get worse, we're better able to develop new capacities? Because those will get worse. But getting worse doesn't mean everything's over. And I think that was for me like one of the, not to be too neat and tidy about it, because I don't enjoy being permanently disabled. But like one of the happy take homes of my set of negative experiences was there's a lot. I didn't.
You can go on, right?
I just got lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's a hard one to talk through competently. My apologies.
Yeah. Well, it's a little personal, so I appreciate you telling us all of that.
Yeah,
and super glad that you are here with us because wow. So, but one of the things, sort of turning back to the book, one of the first things you do is you reorient a particular demographic. That's people that my age, your age-ish, people who grew up on a particular brand of protest music to our idea of history. And you sort of built, you actually named this theory of modern history. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Jello Biafra theory of modern history. I kind of cut my teeth on punk rock music and had for a long time a sense of the world as a place where a lot of things had become impossible at this scale of sort of like large social action, in part via a kind of a Reagan-Thatcher era where all kinds of public goods got dismantled. And I think it's still pretty popular to see our current debilities as societies as products of that large-scale dismantling of society. And part of what I got sort of, frustrated with, I wanted to rework for my own self because it feels like it's kind of if you don't think that large-scale social change is possible because of this one thing, and we all agree that that's our situation, this kind of capitalist realism where we all just kind of are muddling through in some kind of entrepreneurial subjectivity, competitive individualism, all of this stuff, and we're just stuck in that. It's hard to imagine doing something radically different, which isn't to say lots of like punk rock hasn't been associated with communal movements, but I just wanted a different kind of frame. And so I started thinking about it more in terms of this period from 1989 through 92. So instead of like Reagan-Thatcher, which is prior to that, the period where on the one hand, there's the end of the Cold War, fall of the Iron Curtain, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, and more interestingly in some ways, a lot of our inability to produce large-scale change comes from, unhappily, the reneging on the promise of George H.W. Bush's election. George H.W. Bush, and we don't think about this, we don't talk about it all that much. He ran on a climate platform. He ran with the green side of Democrat Michael Dukakis in 1988. He famously thundered you've heard about the greenhouse effect. Well, don't count out the White House effect.
Right.
And then he did nothing. And then we didn't get binding global change. And then we, instead of serious action on the climate crisis, again, this is 1988. We were starting to have a global consensus that we need some kind of massive action that's like the Montreal Protocol on the first CFCs that were destroying the ozone layer. And Bush was expected to produce one, and then he didn't. And then instead we got in 92 a very different story, which is the American way of life is not up for negotiation. And we live in the shadow of that story. The American way of life, which is a way of life that's about consumption, it's about maximizing resource metabolization, is not up for negotiation. And so I found it kind of useful, or interesting at least, to think about. For me, it was useful, and I think maybe it's useful for more people too, to think about, instead of like we're in this, like there was some kind of hope for society building, blah, blah, blah. And instead, Reagan and Thatcher kind of killed that. They killed off unions. Thatcher famously pronounced there's no such thing as society. Reagan inaugurated a certain vision of getting government small enough that you can strangle it in a tub. We didn't inaugurate that, but he forwarded it. Instead of that, I think it's useful to think that actually, after them, Republicans in the United States were still, in fact, arguing for, stumping on, a desire for massive global level action on the collective good. And so that there's actually more capacities for action than we often think that there are, if we take that more, Reagan Thatcher ruined it all view. Which is not to say I have much use for Reagan or Thatcher, but it's just to note that we have within our sort of, even our like social anomie, our social sort of sense of incapacity and despair and alienation and inability to connect. We actually have more resources available than we sometimes think.
So, Ira, your book is centered in the midst of what you call a polycrisis, a crisis in 4 parts. If you will, what are those and why should we be panicking about them? Give me another reason to panic. Go ahead.
Well, so look, I'm not trying to make anybody panic. If you're like wandering around in the world, you're like, I think everything's fine. You're probably not going to read my book and be like, oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that things are not fine. The book speaks to something I think a lot of people already actually feel, which is things are not going well. Things are going really badly. And so what I'm trying to get at with these 4 crises, the AI revolution, the climate crisis, the 6th extinction, you all were just talking about extinction versus threatened species. I also know you've got some emergency librarian work to help draw out those distinctions, which is awesome. But the 6th extinction, and the novel chemical crisis, and I'm just treating those as 4 of the actually many crises. We're in a period where many people correctly apprehend things as going badly. And we want to be like, and we've got all kinds of public stories that are like, don't worry, be hopeful, be resilient, be okay. And this book sort of says, no, you don't have to be okay. You don't have to pretend you're okay. If you're feeling panic, you're right. The question is what we do with panic and how we build with panic, and what role panicking wisely can play in building communities that are able to do better things in the darker times to come. And so I'm not as, I don't want to fall into the trap of sort of telling people start panicking. If you encounter this book and you're like, well, that's stupid, I don't know, I'm probably not going to reach you. Not that that's you, obviously, but for people who have that experience of the world, no one book reaches all audiences. But for anybody who's having the sense of like, wait a minute, we're really not doing anything serious about the climate crisis, are we? We're just going to like buy electric vehicles. That clearly, the math on that doesn't seem like it adds up. Or wait a minute, the sixth extinction. I thought I heard somewhere that that's not even caused so far by climate change. That is mostly just our land and sea use patterns. It's literally just how humans occupy space and what we do in it. Shh, I'm not swearing. Shoot. For anybody who's having that experience, or the experience of looking at the hypertrophying, the really rapid, really intense development of automated intellection, which is kind of how I cash out AI. I think I agree with a lot of people in the field that thinking of it as artificial intelligence is maybe a little too strong, but there's a lot of social change baked in between these different things. And you then tie those together with something we're hardly talking about at all at the large scale, but we talk about constantly at the small scale, which is the fact that we spent the last 120, 150 years synthesizing novel chemicals, just sort of raiding the periodic table. And this is something Rachel Carson wrote about all the way back in the 1960s. And it's something that we still don't have good or effective ways of navigating. And as a result, we're like, oh, PFAS, or, BPAs. Oh, shoot, this new chemical, maybe that's bad. I just read the other day, the EPA approved staggeringly a new Chevron boat and jet fuel made out of recycled plastic that is almost inconceivably carcinogenic. Like every single person exposed to it over a lifetime would develop cancer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so this is
cool.
These are these.
This is fine.
Yeah,
fine. Right, exactly. It's the dog in the room. The room's on fire, and the dog's saying, "This is fine. Everything is fine." And what this book is for is to say, look, if you already are apprehending that things are not fine, how can you think about those things not as just discrete little scary things that are all separate, and your life is just segmented into thousands of different worrisome little pieces, but instead we're in a period of generalized crisis, of polycrisis, of intersecting multiple crises. And when you apprehend that, when you say we are in that period, then the immediate question becomes not, oh, how do I feel hopeful? It becomes, what do I do? What should we do?
Yeah. Now
how
what?
can we behave with others in ways that are functional or useful? Not for preventing crisis, too late for that, but for doing meaningful things next, because it's not too late for that.
Right.
Yeah. So you've given us permission to panic. Thank you for that. And so I think my brain then goes to who can I blame this on? And you've defined in your book a conglomerate or assemblage that has led to these crises. So could you tell us about that assemblage?
Yeah. So I talk in the book about our current times, our times of polycrisis, as essentially like a wound spring. And the winding of that spring is the carbon, capitalism, colonialism assemblage. And it's not to say there are not individual bad actors. God knows there's plenty of individual bad actors. There's no shortage. But and this is what's simultaneously really scary and hard, but also absolutely necessary to deal with, to kind of quote the old Pogo comic, we have met the enemy and he is us.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily the us of humanity because humans are bad or whatever. I don't think that's a useful place to go. But it is a certain kind of global culture that comes at the intersection of burning carbon, organizing legal regimes around the history of colonialism, which is something that's absolutely still maintained, just because colonialism in the classic sense stopped being mostly, although not entirely, stopped being mostly operant doesn't change the fact that the legal structures that are the legacy of that, and we see that, by the way, everywhere, from questions about indigenous sovereignty to Black Lives Matter in the United States. We see that globally in ways that Americans are often not great at talking about, in terms of
or noticing.
Sorry?
I said or noticing, for that matter.
We're noticing, and it's hard. And in fairness, it's hard to notice. It's big, But like, we think about, like, what is the G7? Why is there a G7?
Mm-hmm.
Group of 7 or group of 8? Like, what's that about? It's like, well, it's essentially like former, quasi-former, not that former colonial powers that set the agenda for global politics.
Right.
And that's part of the legacy of colonialism. So this cashes out all over the place. And capitalism, of course, requires, for capital to be realized, you have to speculate in new endeavors. And so these three things together, without, I don't want to say they're, again, without there being like bad actors or like evildoers or whatever. There's plenty, good God, there's no shortage of evildoers. But over and above all that, there's the simple fact that we as societies, we don't have a way to just like opt out of this collection of things. And so the question is, what do you do with that? Knowing that that imposes a bunch of deferred costs that are falling due. And that system as a whole is not able to reincorporate those costs. And those are human costs, those are environmental costs, those are costs for non-human animals, our kin. So what do we do if the system that we are part of has imposed, not it's starting to impose or it will impose, it has imposed, that's done. Yeah. A set of costs. It required, everything costs something. To make order in the world is energetically costly, right? I mean, and so this world that we're in has been energetically costly, and it was also able to like defer acknowledgement of those costs for a very long time. And so when you look at something like the Black Lives Matter movement, part of what you're looking at is literally the deferred costs of slavery in the Constitution of the United States. And this is true for all of the stuff. And that's why thinking about KKK is sort of helpful, because it actually asks us to say, okay, well, a lot of this stuff is deferred costs that are falling due that the system KKK can't incorporate. So if then system is in a phase of collapse.
So KKK, I'm just going to say it. You say it in the book. You call it the shit company.
That's right. Yeah. Well,
I really love that. I'm gonna be the first one to cuss on the show. There we go.
Excellent. Okay, cool. The floodgates are open though, Robin. So like
take it easy.
Absolutely. Like it's a company, it's a firm, it's a way of organizing collective life, resource management and distribution that is not without benefits. It's totally dishonest for us to be like, oh, look at all these bad carbon burners. I mean, we're literally doing this show over a set of fibers buried in the ground, in part through carbon capitalism and colonialism. We are this world. Now, that doesn't mean it's like, it doesn't mean cool. It means that, like, when we say simultaneously we are this world and this world is a shit company, the question is, what happens with the waste?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we're moving into, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, but just it is the case, we're moving into like a phase of world history that is waste management time. And the reality is, for the structure of this system that we're part of, most of us are readily conceived of as waste. That's our non-human kin. That's most humans on the planet. And so when you think like, okay, what relative to the structure of this system, if most of us are conceivable as waste, and that's part of why it's so worrying that an AI revolution intersects with a climate crisis intersects with the loss of ecosystem services and this extinction, intersects with some scary futures that are economic, intersects with the chemical crisis, blah, blah, blah. Part of why it's so worrying, the intersection of all these things, is precisely that most regular people, most people who are not policymakers, who are not oligarchs, ultra wealthy people setting the sort of rule-making processes in place for our system, we are conceivable as waste in that system. And the flip side of that is we are also able collectively and probably ought to consider panicking in time to collectively organize different kinds of waste management. The costs are falling due. There's no way around that. That's happening. There's no like, oh, we'll do this and that, techno magic, woo, no costs.
Techno magic.
That's just not reality based.
Yeah.
Come on.
So the
man.
question is, how do we collectively find new ways to organize our navigation of waste, or to organize our navigation of these costs as they get reincorporated into the overall world system? And that's something I'm actually very hopeful about. Like, there's so much we have not invented. There's so enormous an efflorescence of possibilities throughout human history, as a species history, that we are not tapping into, that we're not doing cool things with at all. There's so much we can in fact do, not to like avoid having to pay the costs. That's not there. That's not on the table. But there's so much we can do to organize that differently so that we don't have most of the human populations and most of the non-human populations of the earth conceived of as just refuse.
Yeah. So today, basically P is for panic, which is the word of today. So you dive into the etymology of this word. Why does this word in particular work in the context better than something that feels less anxiety inducing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thanks, Paris. No one word is necessary. People they sell their word, and you see this all the time. They're like, well, it's this, it's not that. And it's like, yeah, no one word is necessary. This is a useful word, and here's why I think it's useful. I think most people on some level are feeling something awfully like panic. And I think that in general, I mean, it's certainly been one of my own experiences, kind of going back to the accident, going back to some life experiences long before that. Like, in general, we do better when we start by acknowledging the feelings that we have and trying to understand if they're reality-based. Not all feelings are like intensely reality-based in the moment, but some are. And we do best when we start by saying, like, what is the kind of sensibility that a lot of people are having? And I think like two of the core sensibilities a lot of people are having right now around the world are something like panic and something like disaffection or anomie, a sense of like the great refusal, no thanks, I'm out, etc. And I think like actually that latter, in terms of like social possibility, is much more concerning, right? That latter says like we kind of just retreat into ourselves and like just hope that things don't get too much worse before we die. But I mean, the former is like, well, panic you can do something with, and in fact, etymologically, panic in the ancient Greek world, the word literally is something that people do things with. It goes places. And so what I want to get at in the book is to think about how we panic wisely. How can we do collective things with this kind of experience of a sort of a crushing inability to deal with just how bad things are? How do we do something with literally that? Because I think when we're able to collectively navigate really hard experiences, we're really powerful. And that's where the inventional resources of rhetoric come into play. We feel things together and we feel hard things together, and that puts us in a place not to like be like read a book and be like, oh, phew, whew, thank goodness, whoa, hey, it's all better now. It's like, no, it's not. You're not going to read my book and be like, oh, it's all better now. It's not going to be all better. And spoiler alert, even if you read somebody else's book that makes you feel like it's all better, it still won't be all better. And so the question is, how do we live with the feelings that we have so that we're richly embodied people and that we can be open to like the broad set of sensibilities that people bring to their panic in ways that allow us to invent new social structures. And that's the bottom line, is inventing new social structures that don't treat anybody as waste.
Yeah.
So, of the crisis. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry.
That's okay. So, AI is one I think about. One of the crises you mentioned that I think about because we hear a lot about it in academia. Because I think people don't panic in any productive way about this, because a lot of academics, well, at least administrators anyway, are like, oh my God, the kids are going to have a new way to cheat. Then some people are trying to figure out, oh, how can we use this tool efficiently? And others are, thinking about more sinister uses. So they're not really thinking about this smartly. People who study this for a living aside, because there are people who study this who I think are thinking about all of these things in the right way. Then you have working class people who tilt toward the, oh my God, the machines are going to replace us. And there's not really a question there. What can you do with that?
That is classic reviewer too. Here's some stuff.
Here's some stuff that is going on in my head, and
do what you do.
Yeah.
Here's some stuff I do not care for. No, look, I'm with you. Okay, I think a lot of times when we start to feel panic, we don't stay all the way. We don't give it time to unfold as a feeling, and I think this is true for a lot of hard feelings. Like, I mean, I'm not to be overly Hegelian / like, sensitive new age guy, both at the same time, but like you have to tarry with the feelings. You have to be present for a while with hard feelings as they unfold. And I think a lot of the way that people respond to the AI revolution is like, they're like, oh my God, this is really scary. How do I make that go away? Well, the easiest way to make a scary thing go away is to put it into a slot that you already have. So you're like, okay, cool, let's put it in the plagiarism slot. We already have a set of ways of thinking about that, dealing with that, making sense of that. We'll just put it there. Now, that's not to say that AI doesn't actually have pretty significant consequences for who owns writing, how people navigate the production of symbols. It has really significant consequences for that, including for student learning.
Yeah.
But the desire to just put it in the plagiarism box is, in my view, one of those things that comes out of trying to make the panic go away. And we see a similar desire. You see a lot of, on my social media, I see this all the time. A lot of like, oh, it's just like a calculator. It's just like a calculator. It's like, no, it's not just like a calculator. Also, calculators weren't just like calculators. Technologies reshape human experience.
Yeah.
And this is a pretty big one. Because the kind of human experience that's at stake is the experience of meaning making in symbols. And if that can be produced automatically with relatively little human input, then the question of how we receive symbols gets thrown into question. And I'll just like, I'm going to get like a little excursus on this is, think about lying. Okay. Why is lying bad? Like, why is it bad? It's bad because it breaks language. We all have to more or less believe that most of the time other people are referring truthfully. Now, why do we have to believe that? It's because it's the only way we can use language to coordinate activity. If I think every time you say something, you're just saying things, I become unable to coordinate activity with you. But if I don't know at any given moment if there has been some truthful intent to reference the world, so if Paris says, wow, that tree is beautiful, I don't know if Paris is referring to a tree, like what I would agree is a tree. I don't know if Paris is referring to an experience of aesthetics that I could apprehend through my own sense of what beautiful means, etc. I don't have any way to know what that is. I can't do something with Paris. I can't apprehend Paris's Parisness in ways that are going to let us do, make good things together in the world in some way. And so some of the danger with AI, it's not, there are real concerns about like how we do our various traditional things, but we stop short of the like much bigger set of concerns that I think it is and should be panic inducing, which is really about like how does human meaning making happen when it's possible to produce one of our characteristic, in fact, probably our most characteristic way of making meaning without us or with very few of us. Think about how unhappy you are if you find that you have been engaging with a bot on Twitter or somewhere else on social media. You're like, what the and then scale that up to vast swaths of human communication. And there's also questions about like, certainly economies and job losses, a non-trivial question. I think IBM last year paused company-wide all hiring earlier this spring as they tried to figure out which parts of which positions are automatable. And there's a lot of like holding panic at bay that people do, and they do it by putting things in boxes. And so they say like, oh, well, AI can't replace this worker and they can't replace that worker and so on and so forth. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But companies don't hire this person and that person. They hire this collection of tasks. And so if a bunch of these tasks can be automated and you can't replace this one position because it does these special things, but you might not need like 7 people who are doing that. You might be able to get away with 1 part-time. And that's non-trivial. And now I don't want to oversell that because the history of automation essentially is a history of producing technological capacities for automating, and then those not in fact being fully implemented for various reasons, right? We quote unquote all the automation that we're seeing in retail and service industries in the last few years. A lot of that is stuff that was technologically feasible 15 years ago. It's not really all that new. It's not like the existence of a technological capacity necessarily cashes out in a radical restructuring of political economies. But I think the fact that the bar to entry for capital speculation in AI is actually pretty low. Essentially, all you just need is a bunch of money and a huge data set. You don't have to build a new factory. You don't have to retool machines. You don't have, in terms of like material infrastructure, right? If you think about how capitalism works as a system, capital gets realized through investment in new operating systems, so to speak, both like literal factories and also, say, software like Windows. Through investment in the development of new operating systems that allow for value accumulation over and above the cost of labor and operation.
Right.
And the bar for entry for, let's say, creating an automated checkout system in a grocery store, which is itself very similar from one grocery store to another, which is part of why we've seen that happen pretty quickly. But the bar for entry, even for that, is relatively high. You have to create that little chunk of material world. And in order to do that, you have to invest in an actual plant that does that. Or you have to retool your plastic printing to do that. You have to do a lot. Whereas by contrast, for a lot of AI, what you need to do is you need a data processing center. You need an ass load of NVIDIA chips. You need a bunch of stuff that you can kind of, and I don't want to oversimplify it because it's actually the scholar Kate Crawford in her book Atlas of AI writes, I think, brilliantly about the material infrastructure of AI. So I don't want to oversimplify this, but it is a much lower bar to entry for capital speculation than many of the things that we've traditionally thought of as automation. And what that suggests, and I don't want to like forecast this too strongly because I don't know this, of course, but what that suggests is that we'll see a more rapid implementation of automation than we probably do in areas where the bar for entry for capital speculation is higher.
Yeah. So circling back sort of to the human element of this, you argue that collectively we have to design better next worlds or afters. And you have some specific things like solidarities, disruptions, novelties, that you say can be the basis for practical action. Can you take us through some of those?
Yeah, thanks. So I lay out what I think, and these are not like exhaustive, right? But they're four strategies or tools for humanizing that I think can be useful, and that is solidarities, sustaining disruptions, developing novelties, and practicing archaisms. And none of these is like an unalloyed good. Each of these is a site where we can do different things communally than we regularly do. So, for instance, in terms of solidarity, it's really cool, I think, to think about the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strike as the writers' strike and the actors' strike as creating solidaristically new capacities for the rest of us to navigate what AI will mean. One of the core elements of those strikes is about preventing the studios from replacing human writers and actors with machines. It's a John Henry situation. Now, things didn't go so well for John Henry. Actually, if you remember the song, and I don't know what the outcome of those strikes is going to be. I'm hopeful but not optimistic. But no question, the fact of those strikes, which is why we should all be in solidarity with those, by the way, even if you wouldn't automatically be. I kind of automatically would be, so that's easy for me to say. But seriously, even if for a person who's like, oh, I don't like unions, blah, 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 even that person should be in solidarity with these, because what these are about at the end of the day is the role of humans in creative activity.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is creating more space for the rest of us. And that's what solidarity does. Solidarity creates new possibilities of connection that didn't previously exist. It's incredibly powerful. Sorry, I get verklempt. No, but seriously, I think like this is, there's so much possibility that comes out of that sort of thing. And I won't go through all of the others, but I will just say really quickly, and we had to reschedule today's episode in part because of climate change driven severe storms in your area coming to you. And
I was out of power for 2 days. 2 full days. And that was the least of some of the problems around here. So,
and this thing of what's at stake here in our very small way, we just kind of rolled with the punches there. We're all like comparatively privileged in terms of what access to material resources we have, our ability to reshape our schedules, blah, blah, blah. Not so, say, for kids who are crawling across stopped trains on the tracks on their way to school. I was just reading about this the other day. So what sustaining disruption in my mind is about not just like, okay, we roll with the punches here, but something a little bit bigger, which is as things get worse, and things will get worse, the temptation for more people, wherever they are, is going to be, because it often is, to just buy into somebody who's like, I will fix it. I'll make it better. It's going to be better. I'll fix it, and I will fix it for us. because actually it's those people over there who are fucking it up. So I will fix it for us. And I think about this because I live at the wildland urban interface in a fire zone. I think about this in terms of forest fires. I think about it in terms of homeless residents or unhoused residents who are forest dwellers, some totally volitionally, some because they can't afford to be anywhere else. And the number of people who find themselves living in the forest either volitionally or not so volitionally increases all the time. And it increases in ways that increase the likelihood that somebody somewhere along the line starts a fire. There's no way around that. And the question is, what sensibilities, what communal practices, what ways of being together can we pursue right now so that the next time there's a horrific wildfire that threatens or burns my house, I don't fall into the temptation of being like, oh, those people in their badness.
Yeah.
And this is a hard thing. It's easy in principle to suppose oneself immune to the lure of fascism. But in practice, when your shit is threatened, it's hard. And so what sustaining disruption is about finding modes of community now where we still have comparatively better times that sustain us as people who don't buy into some of the worst kinds of political narratives, the most dehumanizing kinds of political narratives as things get worse. And again, like, so in my usual ebullient gloom, I'm actually very, very optimistic about our capacity for doing that. Like, yeah, things will get worse. Yeah, it will be tempting for many people to buy into really, really awful narratives. And right now, literally right now, if we panic wisely enough, we can produce different conditions.
Right. I think ebullient gloom might be a good phrase for us to sort of almost end on there. I do very much appreciate you joining us today, helping us think through all of this. And thank you so much, Ira, for joining us. Thank you, Emergency Librarian, for sticking with us.
Oh, of course.
And now we are heading over to check this out.
Thank you so much.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for hanging around for our special discussion on media literacy and how it intersects with some of the world's most pressing global crises of our time. I'm your host, Paris Whalen, and with the help of a familiar face, welcome back, Robin, we're diving into the importance of being informed and discerning in the face of challenges like global warming and other topics brought up today, right?
Indeed. And yeah, media plays a huge role in shaping how we perceive these issues. Global warming, let's just pick one thing, the climate crisis in particular. There's a lot of information you can find out there. Some of it is accurate, some of it is not. Mm-hmm. And it's crucial to know how to tell the difference.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, the media is absolutely amazing at developing these headlines that can really hook you with their fancy creative language and even their inaccurate narratives that kind of speak to you and like your pettiness a little bit. You know, it's known as like sensationalized news, you know. Yep. However, though, media literacy helps us dissect those complex media messages and even those scientific reports or graphs and things that they put up on the news for us to, you know, somehow dissect in a couple of seconds, you know. And hopefully with media literacy, we can make informed decisions about our health and the environment.
Yeah, and I mean, it's sort of as we've already covered, AI is just going to continue to become more integrated into our lives, and media can fuel misconceptions and be a useful tool in helping us navigate that. Mm-hmm. So being media literate empowers you to engage in meaningful conversations about all of the intricacies around these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, how could we ever forget about AI being in higher ed? It's like been the topic of the last semester between our like working groups and research guides and, you know, even the website we have to help understand and encourage responsible use of generative AI. But anyway, with all these things happening, I did tune into the news intentionally this week to kind of prep for this episode. And in light of all of my privilege, I was able to enter weather into the New York Times. I didn't even look that hard. And as predicted, I ran into all of the most recent crises, the typhoon that devastated Japan and South Korea, the wildfire that's going on in Maui, and now there are like water system that's collapsing. There was even a little bit about the flooding in northern and northeastern China, which I knew nothing about. And then I ran into tons of articles about censorship. So beyond that, we even had our own problems that we talked about earlier. Knoxville was having a hard time with weather. We lost power. There was flooding. We could say that this all is or isn't related to global warming, but we can probably all agree that something is very wrong, right? Yeah. So how do I keep from spiraling, in this doomsday situation? For me, I spend a lot of time seeking out information so that I can come to an understanding about what's happening and what I can do realistically.
Right. The doom spiral is real. And so what we want to do here is provide some practical tips to help navigate the information overload and evaluate all of the news that you are attempting, anyway, to digest.
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, we're going to start off with our search terms. These are some of those terms that stood out to me. Maybe I was unfamiliar with, or I needed some more context, but most of the things I actually got from Dr. Allen's forthcoming book, Panic Now. I got from his footnotes, and also I followed the bibliography or the references from other sources that I ran into along the ways. Now, Robin, as a seasoned researcher, do you have anything to add when it comes to search terms here, or even beginning with an article or post that our listeners may want more information about?
No, well, I mean, I would just say for those of you who don't know where to start, head over to the library, visit with a librarian or other information professional. Practitioners are a good option. Those are people who are experts in a particular subject matter. And the beauty of a subject specialist assisting you is you get that very specialized references, resources, and services that you're going to need. Other good places to start on the academic side, you can start with Google Scholar. You can go to an organization's website, and you hinted at it. Once you found a particular source, check out the references and dig deeper into those, because usually when a scholar like Dr. Allen is creating a book, they're looking at a whole bunch of other stuff to sort of pull together their argument. Mm-hmm. And don't discount Wikipedia either. A lot of those articles have a list of references to help you dig deeper into a topic. Wikipedia gets a bad rap, particularly among some librarians. But if you don't have any knowledge at all on a particular topic, it's a great place to start. It can give you some keywords, and it just really help you sort of figure out where to start on digging deeper into a topic. The key here, I would argue, is being completely honest with yourself about what you do know and what you don't know.
Yeah. Did y'all hear that? What you do know, what you don't know. Pay attention. It's okay. There will be holes there, but that's okay.
All of us have stuff we don't know anything about.
Right. Yeah. So, with that being said, let's focus on evaluating these sources. Probably by now you've got loads of information from different articles, some of which probably contain conflicting and questionable information and claims, right? So first we need to verify our sources. We need to check if the information comes from a reputable place. Misinformation can spread like fire, not wildflowers. So don't share
wildflowers spread pretty hard too.
True. True. So don't share something until you're sure that it's accurate, unless it's flowers. So here are going to be some questions you might ask about your sources to kind of dig into the quality or the validity of said sources. So who wrote this article or provided this data set that you're looking at? Who are they associated with? What is the goal of the sponsor or the funder of this research? Okay. In this particular case, you might want to know more about the Governor Sununu, which is someone I ran into along the way when I was doing research in this. And you might want to figure out his stance on global warming. You also might have your own opinions on some of these topics as well. Just remember to kind of check in with those preconceived notions and what those sources might be as well.
Right. And pay close attention to the context. context. Headlines can be misleading, so you want to dive deeper into the article. Actually read the article. So don't just look at the headline you see on social media and then get mad at the headline and then start spouting off everywhere, because you don't want to be that person.
Talk louder for the people in the back.
Yeah. Here's some examples of headlines that can grab your attention. But I mean, the end of life on Earth, I mean, come on. We were just talking about the fact that things are not going well, but like, just settle down, take a deep breath, and think this through. They can be biased, they can be completely inaccurate. But yet, publisher, who's the publisher of this? What organization is publishing this? Do they have a particular bent, a particular reason for taking this particular tack on the story? Is it an opinion piece? Are they at least attempting to be objective? Is it current is a key thing, because I've seen so many things, particularly over the last couple of years, where people are sharing stuff from like 5 years ago. And it's like, yeah, we all knew that already.
And it's out of context too.
And it's out of context. Yes.
Yeah.
Completely out of context, out of its time, out of its context. It's not attached to actual reality anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of headlines, there's actually a great Netflix documentary that's I think it's called How to Become a Tyrant, How to Be a Tyrant. But there's an episode on Joseph Stalin. And one of the things I remember coming up, there's this version of this quote, and it's like, control the narrative and control the people. And yeah. So this is absolutely why critical thinking is key in combating misinformation. So this means skillfully questioning and analyzing information from those various sources to determine its accuracy, its credibility, and potential biases. Again, we're not just accepting information at its face value. And this includes those data sets that they pop up on the screen really quickly, those graphs that like seem to be very clear, but you're like, I don't think these things correlate at all. And even scientific papers, just because Exxon funded a survey on something doesn't mean that it's unbiased and they don't have other things at the back of their minds, So ask these questions, dig deeper, and don't be afraid to challenge what you read or hear. The worst thing is you might be wrong, and you can just be like, my bad. And and then correct change your outlook a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think the key point there is that media literacy isn't just about consuming information, but actively engaging with it. Because we're facing global challenges here, and we're all trying to navigate a media landscape that's evolving. And I think coming at that in good faith is the way we sort of move forward through it.
Absolutely. And, the more media literate we are, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions and contribute meaningfully to finding solutions or ways to deal with the current and ongoing crisis, right? So hopefully y'all can use these tips we provided to help you become an informed consumer of these heavy topics. And know that your activism, no matter how big or small, is absolutely necessary.
Yep, we've got crises that demand our attention, our understanding, and as our guest scholar noted, our action. This media literacy is one of our big toolkits for deciphering truth from noise. And as you think through all of these crises, let media literacy be your guide. Sharpen your skills, ask questions, challenge assumptions.
Yeah, real talk. I second that. And I also encourage all of you to take a look at what's going on around the world today. Not only the natural disasters, but the opportunities to come to terms with what's been done and what your contributions towards a better future might look like. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the Check This Out segment. You're not just a passive observer. You're an empowered agent of change, tackling global challenges, one informed step at a time, right? Be lit until next time. We're out.
Yeah, that's all we have for this episode. Thank you for watching, and we hope you will join us again for more.